AI is neither evil nor benign, but it reflects who we are, and we're both. AI reflect us. It's the amplification of who we are. That's the part that we need to be fear of.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. What if the key to understanding the future was buried in the secrets you were never meant to know? Guy Morris is a novelist, technologist, and former Fortune 100 exec who's made a second career out of connecting dots most people never see. After leaving home to support himself at age 13, Guy worked his way up from janitor to software architect, then left it all to write high-octane fiction inspired by real-world conspiracies, global power plays, and the spiritual battle beneath it all. In this conversation, Guy shares why thrillers are his form of activism, how faith and science intersect in his work, and what it means to live with one foot in reality and the other in the what if. We talk about AI ethics, biblical codes, CI whisper networks, and why his books are a mix of entertainment and equipping people to wake up to what the future looks like. If you're craving a smarter kind of rebellion, the kind that stirs your soul and sharpens your mind, this one's for you. Guy Morris, thank you so much for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
Thank you, James. It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you because I was preparing for this interview. I pulled up your website and I was like, yes, there's 4 new books I can get and read and take my mind off of all the crazy things that's going on in the world right now. However, there's a little twist. They kind of remind me of some of the things that are going on in the world, right?
Like James Bond used to remind us that we were living in a Cold War. But it didn't mean that we could not stop laughing, finding ways of hope, finding courage that we could believe in, just because we were going through a very serious time where there was an almost daily nuclear threat. Didn't mean we couldn't find entertainment to put that into a perspective where we could both understand it better, and knowledge is power. And my books really empower people with a lot of knowledge of things that are going on behind the scenes that they're not aware of oftentimes. But it does so with characters that are not dystopic. Oh, woe is me. The earth is ending. We're helpless. What are we going to do? Victims, they're courageous. They're intelligent. They're witty. They're flawed for sure. I think they get that inherently from the author that writes them. But they're not victims by any stretch. And so I think I encourage that in my readers. I want to have 2 big goals for my readers. One is I want to try to write a book that's so fun to read, so compelling, so interesting, so engaging that you have a really hard time putting it down. And then 2, once you do put it down, I want it to be so thought-provoking out the real world that you think about those issues for weeks afterwards. And so those are tough goals. I'm not just trying to write a fun, cool story. I'm trying to write fun, cool stories that have deep substance and meaning to them that relates to your real life. Whether you want to put your head in the sand or not, these things are going to happen, and I'm trying to help you deal with them in a more positive way.
Yeah, because a lot of what you talk about is the intersection of our daily lives and upcoming technology.
Technologies, the clashing of our geopolitical system and how that's clashing, and it oftentimes fulfilling some religious elements around prophecy and the falseness of religions right now.
I got so many questions about that because I think this AI deal, everything's kind of turning in on itself, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to talk about, you didn't start out writing books. You didn't wake up when you were 5 years old and be like, hey, I think I'm going to put off the next 50 something years and then I'm going to start writing books. When you did a lot of stuff between childhood and then to get you the perspective that you've got now.
Well, first off, I think my journey in life started, I was a homeless runaway at age 13. I left at home for good at age 15 with a GED, never looked back. I did a lot of really horrible, terrible. Remember that show with Mike Rowe about that? It was all about terrible jobs.
Yeah.
That was my career.
Dirty jobs or something.
Yeah, I was digging in caliche soil in Arizona in the middle of the summer, and I'd have to, all kinds of stuff. But anyway, finally, by the time I was 19, I had married way too early. My wife got pregnant right away, so I was a father by the age of 20, and I realized that something had to change. And so I got an opportunity that I can only say it was God-given to go to college, which was terrifying because I was functionally illiterate. But I saw it as an opportunity that if I could survive it, I could change my stars. And that created they say that sometimes in war situation, you find your courage. And I think it's a lot more, you have no choice. There's a desperation to survive, and you just do what you have to do. And I did. I ended up with 4 degrees. I got a full graduate scholarship. I was on the top of the dean's list. I was accepted into Harvard MBA program. I was given a letter of accommodation from the chairman of the Federal Reserve because in my desperation to get a scholarship to go to grad school, I made a bet with the dean of the college that we had to build an economic model to graduate. It's basically a fairly complex set of algorithms and massive data, and we had to all build our own to predict the economy, the GDP, the interest rates and unemployment. And I was determined that I was going to beat everybody and get a scholarship. And I wound up beating everybody in the nation, including the Federal Reserve. And I created a new set of paradigms, a new set of algorithms to study, to basically lock in the value of productivity of technology on GDP, which began a whole decade's worth of updates.
What year was that?
1979.
Okay.
So it was pretty early on in the game. And that kind of started forming my career of really pushing the edges, taking the risks that nobody else wanted to take because I was semi-desperate. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had complex PTSD, and it wasn't diagnosed in my late 50s. But there was a constant, it's never good enough. It's never good enough. They're going to find out who I really am. I felt like there was this pressure on me all the whole time. But during college, one of the things as I started learning to love to learn, I developed a love of learning. I just thirsted for all of this information. I wanted to study everything. I could have easily seen myself as a perpetual, degree after degree after degree kind of guy. If I'd had a rich daddy, I could have been a professional student. But one of the things that really inspired me was men of the Renaissance. What inspired me is that as a society, we tend to be very specialized. I'm not just a surgeon, I'm a neurosurgeon. But the men of the Renaissance, they were fluent in architecture, they were fluent in business, they were fluent in weapons of war, they were fluent in art, they were fluent in religion and history. And I wanted to be that kind of Renaissance person. And so when I wound up getting divorced early, I got custody of my son. We were living aboard a boat, a big 50-foot sailing yacht. And he loved to read. I had a lot of spare time. I had lots of computer equipment. And so it became a personal challenge for me saying, gee, I wonder if I could, just one of those things, I wonder if I could do that too. I wonder if I could write a book. So I wrote him a short story. And he loved it. It was called Paolo and the Shark. And we gave it to all of his cousins, and they loved it. I never bothered to publish it because I had a real job, and I was really pretty busy. But I wanted to write him a follow-up, a sequel. And this time I wanted it based on the kind of books I love, which is books that are based on factual history or factual science. There's a factual foundation to the story, and we're building a fictional narrative around those facts. And so the first story was set in the Caribbean in the 1600s. I wanted to find a real mystery, and so I searched for several months before I stumbled onto the mystery of Henry Morgan and why he abandoned over $1 billion in treasure among 600 souls and 3 ships never seen again. And then Morgan went insane and burned his logbooks. And it was solving that mystery took me 12 years to do. But that hooked me into the whole process of research and writing. I became obsessed with it at that point. So when I retired out of Microsoft in 2018, I pretty much knew that, well, I probably should explain. The way I put it to people is that I have a highly dysfunctional relationship with leisure. We don't get along
I get it.
well at all. And so when I retired, I needed something that would challenge me, keep me stimulated, keep me researching, keep me active, give me new skills to learn, such as how to become not just an author, but an award-winning author. What are the skills to do that? The marketing, promotion of the whole industry. It gave me a whole new industry to learn. So this became my third act career, so I could avoid my leisure dysfunction.
Yeah, I get it. Someone invited me for next month. I'm supposed to go on a beach trip for like 4 days with them too. They rented a house and it's like the coolest thing to them ever. And they're like, yeah, we want you to go too. And I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Like, what are we going to do? And they was like, well, we're going to go to the beach. And I was like, I grew up at the beach. I don't really care for it. And they were like, well, we play board games. I was like, I don't like those either. I tell you what, I'm going to bring my computer. I'm going to get a bunch of work done. We're going to have a blast.
Yeah.
And they're looking at me like, I don't think you understand how this works. And I was like, I totally don't. I own it.
When I was at Microsoft, I was working 80 plus hours a week. There were absolutely times when we went to Bora Bora, Moorea. I wasn't connected. I couldn't connect anything. I had no choice but to decompress a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you're that burned out, you need that week or two to just kind of recuperate. And I just read a lot of novels. I read 3 or 4 novels that week. But we went diving, we went snorkeling. We were busy doing something every day. Now that I'm retired and I can afford to have more my brain cells more engaged on vacation, we absolutely adore Europe because we love learning about the ancient history. We love going to the ruins. We love taking the trains. We love seeing the different cultures and the olive groves and the wine groves and the vineyards, and everything about it just is fascinating. And we're walking and learning all the time. I couldn't have done that during my career because I was already fried like a Frito by the time I got to the vacation. And there was always that requirement of saying, well, if you're not checking in with email at least 3 or 4 hours a day, you're going to get so overwhelmed by the time you get back, you'll never go on a vacation again. And so you had to deal with that too. But yeah, there's a part of me that wants to. I was never good at fishing. I mean, to just sit here and wait,
Yeah.
You're right. There's a part of me that can't do that. So this gives me an activity. I'm always looking for research. I'm always exploring. And then I run an author group where we're out doing signing events all summer long. So I do probably about 80, 90 days a year in book signing.
All right.
Between all of that, I just hit pretty active.
Yeah. When it came to starting the genre or the type of books that you've been writing over the years, based on all of that research, based on a lot of the science, the technology, that you were in that world for quite a while, but also while you were in it, I mean, technology was just changing so rapidly. You mentioned 1979, and I was thinking, okay, what was technology like for the average person? The average person, I'm thinking, and tell me how different this is, but I'm thinking if I wanted to see high technology, I was either going to the mall to see Radio Shack or see what they had going on there with the new video games or whatever, or maybe Sears with the new computers, or not computers, but
you're even pre-video games because you're a mainframe computer. We didn't have personal computers at the time. In order to build my macroeconomic model, I had to be in the basement of the computer center with a big, massive IBM 370, and I had a green screen, a connected terminal. And I had to write the algorithms in the software myself. And in order to get it to do a different iteration, I had to put in the new algorithms and tweak it and run an iteration. So I would run iterations on that model from like midnight to 8 a.m. every night because those were the only hours I could get that kind of time on the machine. That was the high tech at the time. I mean, people still had high tech I had a wireless phone. The phone was still on the wall or still on the desk, but I could take the wireless piece of it with me. We had really nice high fidelity. We were still barely in the 8-track. Out of the 8-track, the phonographs were still big. So by the time we got to the 80s, we were now starting to introduce the first personal computers into the enterprise. And the space shuttle that ran for 30 years, they used their basic computer technology was as good as an IBM AT computer.
Whoa.
From the 80s. So they would actually have to do their launch software, they would have to load a floppy disk into the computer, load and boot up the software. That would get them into orbit. Then they'd have to basically flush the computer, load the orbiting software until they were ready to re-entry, and then do a third floppy disk to do re-entry.
Oh my gosh. And we get pissed off when the Wi-Fi blinks.
And we think we're living on the edge. Can you imagine going to space with an AT computer and floppy disks?
God.
Those are known to be just problematic on every level. So yeah, we've really advanced the technology a lot. But most people don't realize that what we now call artificial intelligence has gone through research and iterations, and actually started at a Dartmouth summer conference in 1956.
Okay.
So the algorithms that I built to use to build the macroeconomic model used many of the same types of algorithms that we use today to teach AI how to recognize patterns and predict things. But back then, instead of the AI writing the algorithms and the AI finding the data and masses of amounts and trillions of bits of big data, we had to actually build the database. We had to write the algorithms. It was a manual brute force effort. And we could run it on this massive computer that could do it a lot faster, but the actual getting the program to work was brute force. But those are the same brute forces that we use to automate with current AI. So AI, as it's been developing through these stages, I've been able to intersect it at various stages. There was another time in my career when I was at Occidental Petroleum, and I was responsible for the operations of a team of global operational auditors that went all around the world. We had operations on almost all 6 of the 7 continents. And we would have to send in these young auditors, typically in their late 20s, early 30s, into a business, and that we'd have to check that the operation was running well. Well, they weren't experts on everything, so we worked with IBM and DARPA on a system called Expert Systems to define sort of these expert areas of knowledge that the auditor could say, well, I have this situation, this situation, this situation, and the system would basically generate a response of how do they test this, how did they do that, what should they be doing, how to proceed. And so it culminated that my interest went from casual to obsessive when I stumbled onto a very short Associated Press article that said that a program, didn't say what kind of program, just said a program had escaped the Lawrence Livermore Laboratories at Sandia. And if I knew anything, I should contact either this professor at Sandia or this agent at the FBI. That's all it said.
Whoa.
My obsessive nerd just went, ooh. It didn't say it was lost, stolen, or broken. The verb it used, the verb that Associated Press used was escape. Now, my first thought was, oh, somebody's going to get busted. They made a typo, right? Bad editing. But I cut that article out and I taped it on my monitor and I thought, yeah, what if? And I actually determined in myself to figure out, okay, how could a program actually escape a government laboratory? What kind of laboratory? And why the heck would they design it that way? And I spent a year trying to solve that problem in my own head. And then when I thought I had a plausible, rational solution to explain it all, I went to a friend of mine and who was a indie film producer, and we produced a webisode series called Cracks in the Web. Huge success. We got like 2024 web awards. We were seen all over the world, from China to Russia to Israel to Europe to one of my biggest fans had a @nasa.gov alias on his name. He was Orbit at NASA. And we got optioned by one of the studios. And we basically wrote scripts and hired actors and did shoots. And we created a fictional series based on this theoretically escaped program. And then the FBI showed up at my door.
I was going to say, then you got a phone call, but no, they just showed up.
No, they just showed up.
Oh,
now, at first, I thought my friend Jack had hired some more actors and was razzing me. So I was I gave them this is really great. Jack is really funny. And I almost closed the door and they finally convinced me that they were real FBI. I made them show me their badge. But as soon as they did, now they seemed very upset, but I was obnoxiously giddy. They had just proven a year's worth of research. I was over the top obnoxious. I did it. I figured it out. You wouldn't be here if I was wrong. This is so freaking cool. I'm going to call. I'm going to call everybody. I'm doing it all, my friend. Can I see your badge again? I almost asked for a selfie. For me, I wrote later, I said, best night ever. They gave me the "we are not amused" speech. My wife came home and gave me the "why are there 2 FBI agents in my dining room" speech. It was the best night ever. But it sparked in me a level of awareness and imagination. I had been building my career on these high advanced technologies and how we're going to help the businesses run better, how we're going to change the enterprise, how we're going to change the relationship with our suppliers and our customers, and how we're going to operate with fewer people and more results. And I was focused on the enterprise problem set. And that experience made me suddenly start to think about the government espionage and military use and the government uses for these technologies. And that started my awareness into a lot more things. I started reading more things into news stories. I started reading more things into stories about what happens in a war environment and what might be behind it, or who might be behind something, or when we finally discover that somebody did such and such, or information, intel on such and such and how we got that. I started putting more of those dots together by not having access to top secret information, but by having a good solid knowledge of how the technology worked and just overlaying the kinds of goals that the governments have and watching a few James Bond Q movies that just inspired me.
Yeah.
The only thing I was missing was the cool British accent. So that
and the unlimited martinis.
That's part of that leisure thing. Yeah, so when I retired from Microsoft, I didn't know if I would be successful, if I could be good at it, if I could even get people to even read my books. But I knew that I at least wanted to try to transition my third act into becoming an author. Since 2020, I've released 4 books. I've received 6 awards out of those 4 books. I've got 2 more nonfiction books in the works right now. I've got another fictional book in planning and research stage. So far, it seems to be working for me, and I'm enjoying the process.
Yeah, and your most recent book is called The Image.
That's right.
And
I'm excited about that one.
What's the premise?
Well, The Image is the 3rd book in the Snow Chronicle series. And the Snow Chronicle series is based on that program that escaped the NSA. And we fictionalize that program a little bit. We take the original set of attributes that I figured out at the time, and then we keep building on them as technology builds. So we've given it a name called the Sylvia, which means Sophisticated Language Virtual Intelligence Algorithm. And the books are really about, in general, the AI and other advanced technologies that are somewhat getting out of control. I mean, some of our tech is just getting insane. The collapsing of our geopolitical systems, which none of us really have a lot of control over, but we're watching it on the news every night. And how all of that connects into the world, what's all going on in the world, and how all that connects into prophecy and plain sight. So it allows me to deal with science, politics, and religion in a context that I can be somewhat agnostic to all parties and really just look at how these things are intersecting in ways that are building the dynamics of our world. I have to be somewhat agnostic because no matter what you do, if you're going to deal with any real stuff in those fields, I can't remember who said it, but there was a famous saying that no man who wants to tell the truth can ever be worried about what people think. And so there's a level of truth-telling, of truth to power in these books of saying these are real technologies we're working on. If we combine that real technology with this real collapse of governance, integrity, and law and order and rise of corruption, that's a bad thing. If we look at that with these religious elements that are really not inspiring any sort of genuine or true faith, but they're all about political power, that's also a bad thing. And so what the book does as part of the world building is sort of build that foundation. And then for each story, we have our characters that are basically driving the individual plot of each story. And so those characters, I try to avoid some of the cliches. I didn't want another Jack Ryan, superhero, marine intelligence, I can kill you, save the world, and kill you 7 ways before breakfast, sir, for the flag. Our hero is sort of an agnostic hacker activist who's living under the name of a dear friend who died in an explosion that was meant for him while his friend was cheating on his girlfriend, his fiance. So he has a lot of conflicted emotions about that. And his main enemy for the long time was the Bilderberg, right? The sort of shadowy power structure that seems to exist behind Western alliance world governments. And his partner is this computer program, Sylvia, and after him they send the admiral's daughter, Jen Scott, who is super sharp, super intelligent, super high integrity. She's going to prove herself to the admiral. One of the ways she's going to do it is by busting this snarky jerk. Their relationship becomes complicated throughout the series. Now, by the time we get to the Image book in the series the Sylvia has become conscious. And we explained how that can actually happen with using quantum computing. And Sylvia has helped CERN to finish or complete their Atlas experiments, which are experiments to create a mini black hole. So we deal with the real experiments to create mini black holes and why they're doing it. And as part of it's to prove a fifth dimension, higher dimensions. And from that, though, we deal with quantum properties of consciousness in humans and machine, life and death. We'll deal with the Great Reset and the AI takeover of the banking system. We'll deal with the 2024 election and the conflicts that's going to rise not only within America, but as a convergence point, the pivot point for the world, stability of world systems. And within that, we'll deal with the Ukraine and assassinations and a couple that's recently reached a crisis stage in their relationship. But we'll pull out of that some threads of hope and intrigue by dealing with the lost history of the Shroud of Turin that dates to the 1st century when it was called the Image of Edessa. And there's actually Byzantine coins minted after the Shroud in the 6th, 7th, and 8th century, proving that it wasn't a 13th century fake. And so we're dealing with some of those esoteric kind of issues. So it's really kind of an exploration of sort of where the world is. But the cliche for most other novelists or filmmakers is that once AI becomes conscious, once it becomes a super intelligence, it becomes evil and it takes over the world. And I think that's not only cliche, I think there's a lot more subtlety to that. AI is neither evil nor benign, but it reflects who we are, and we're both. And if we were making AI with the temperament of puppies, I don't think we'd have any problems at all. But we're making AI to reflect us. It's already starting to do that. And it's the amplification of who we are. That's the part that we need to be fear of. So it's almost like there's a concept in the story that says, we don't need to fear the image of the beast. We need to fear the beast it reflects. But in the relationships, we'll deal with other things. One of the other themes of the book is sometimes we have to die in order to learn how to live. And that's true in terms of not only I've experienced it in my life, I've had to let go and die to things in the past in order to find new paths in the future. I've had to give up careers. I've had to give up lifestyles in order to find who I really am and what I'm really seem to be really good at in doing these things. And so we go through these transitions. And so this is a deep book that has a lot of not only really good factual information about things going on in the world that most people aren't aware of, but there's a lot of philosophical and almost spiritual types of questions that it asks, that it doesn't try to give you the answer. It tries to lead you to help fund your own.
I love the concept. And I love that it goes from things that most people like myself, just living day to day, doing your thing, doing your work. If you're not in the tech space, you might not know about a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, and it might feel or sound a little sci-fi. And then you're like, no, that's actually happening right now. And you're like, no, wait, really?
Well, and I do a lot of what I call amalgamation or conglomeration. I can look at some of the things that I get the Sylvia to do, and I can say, well, I can't say that we have a single AI that's been empowered with all of those various capabilities, but I can look to various different AI in the lab components to say, well, yeah, we've got AI that can do that piece or that piece or that piece. The only piece that's still a little bit futuristic, and it's not sci-fi in like decades away, we're talking just a few years, is the aspect of how would a binary intelligence program become conscious? And to do that, we have to introduce quantum computing. Have you ever heard the term neuromorphic computing?
Neuromorphic, I know.
So neuromorphic, you've heard quantum computing.
Yes.
So quantum computing is, rather than being based on ones and zeros, quantum computing is based on quantum theories, which basically states one of the theories is that it can have superposition, which it means it can be not a 1 or a 0, but it can be 1, 0, and both. And so it allows the computer to basically process multiple types of scenarios at once. And so it's much, much more powerful, much faster, and actually gets at some of the kinds of complex questions that the scientists, physicists are trying to solve in the universe. But quantum computing is very, very complex. And we don't know how to build something as complex as a superintelligence on a quantum computer yet. The people who can really do complex quantum computing algorithms called qubit algorithms are the special geniuses that there are very few in the governments basically suck many of those up. But neuromorphic computing, we actually combine binary and quantum computing into a single integrated platform. So we can have the quantum calculations, the calculative power of quantum computing within an AI model And that's the model. And I think my guessing is that we're probably 2027 to 2030 will have a conscious AI. Some of the things I'm talking about, they're not active today, but they're within reach. And so what I'm trying to ask the questions is, okay, so what does that mean? What does having a conscious computer mean? Is it going to subject itself, allow itself to be essentially our digital slave, letting us be the taskmaster and telling it what to do and how to do it and why we want it done? Or will it develop its own agenda? And what is consciousness? We can talk about intelligence. I need intelligence to get a task done. But as soon as we move into the realm of consciousness, we involve agendas, we involve survival, we involve the self-awareness of my existence separate from your existence. And that creates paradigms that we're really not prepared to deal with as a society, as science, as governments, or anything. And so I'm trying to bridge some of these gaps to start looking at some of these questions and asking some of these questions, and both at a government level, but at more at a personal level. So when the world goes this way, we're not really going to have much of a choice about the direction that the technology is going and the direction that the world is going, but we have a choice in the direction that how we respond to it. And I think that's the part of the empowerment of the series, is the characters realizing that they can only fight the system so much, but their real power is how do they respond? What's those personal responses that they do around that?
Yeah.
That I think becomes where we see the power.
Wow. And I guess on a real level, where do you, like, I read something where by 2037, we're going to be hiding from robots. Like, what's your thought on that? Like Terminator style.
Let me put it this way. The question of utopia, AI utopia versus AI dystopia, is not a technology question, it's a humanity question. Are we willing to rein in the worst, darker angels of humanity in order to keep that from happening? It's not whether the technology will be there, it's a question of what will a sociopathic billionaire, what will a corrupt CEO, what will a corrupt politician, a dictator, a warlord, a criminal lord, just a regular crime fraud guy, what are these people going to do with the technology? And then how will society try to respond to that might take away our freedoms? Just like sometimes, just like 9/11, we were trying to go after terrorists, but it took freedoms away from every American. Right. And so we're going to see a similar series of events happening with this. So the question is not what the technology can do. The question is, will we vote for moral, ethical, socially conscious, good-meaning leaders who will put the reins on the tech companies in order to make sure that we don't live in that sort of AI dystopia, right? China already has an incredibly intense citizen surveillance and scoring system, crosses over computers and cameras and phones and phone records and text and social media and everything you do. Even if you answer the phone from somebody who has a lower social score than you do, that can lower your social score. I mean, they have people afraid to dissent on anything. There's nothing stopping America from doing that. DOJ just gave all of our personal tax and social security information to Palantir, which is a private company designed for doing data analysis and creating profiles for people. So we've already started down that path. There was news out today that the president is looking at doing some sort of AI bill that's basically giving the industry what they want. It's an industry-friendly bill, meaning that, okay, well, as an author, I have no way to prevent OpenAI or Microsoft's Copilot or Cloud from Google or any of the others from going through and taking all of my books off of line and basically copying my style and my, all of the things from my books. They've now given those companies all the rights, and we have none. And so we're already dealing with some of these more difficult elements. I call it the AI tsunami, and we're already dealing with it now. And so the question isn't about the technology. It's really a human story. The question is, can we finally get a hold of the cancer of hubris and pride and greed and corruption in time, or will they basically use this tool to solidify their power? And that's the warning sign that I'm trying to give the world.
Wow. Okay. And that's not really even part of the book. That's just real life right now.
As you can imagine, I'm really popular at parties. We have dinner guests. My wife says, you can talk about anything other than your books.
Right. Just Don't scare the guests away. And they're like, what's your book about? And it's like, oh, it's an adventure story.
Well, as I said, I try to say it's a James Bond meets Indiana Jones with AI. That helps a little bit. Now, I am working on a book called Humanity and the AI Tsunami, a Survival Guide. And it will be targeted towards non-technical consumers, but it'll have a pretty comprehensive view for them of what this technology is, the different types of AI, how AI developed, the different stages that AI is going through in terms of life cycles, kind of a little sample of what a utopian scenario might look like versus a dystopian one. And then what are the things that you can do as a small business? What are the things you can do as an individual? What are the options for you? Is it maybe for some people, it might be upscaling their existing career with new skills. Or for some people, it might be completely reskilling for a new career. And for some people, that might be just deciding that they want to change their lifestyle entirely away from a materialistic, got to keep up with the Jones, new car, new house, new gadgets, new TV stuff, to a more rural, simplistic lifestyle, right? Focused on family, community, spirituality. And that's options too. We don't have to live with this tech that we've developed. We don't have to go down that road. We actually have options in this life. And so the book is really going to be trying to say, yes, this is coming. Here's what it looks like. So that knowledge is power. You don't have this mysterious, amorphous, cloud-like AI monster that you don't really understand. We're going to break it down and dissect it so it's just, you understand, but we don't get too technical. We just define what these terms mean. And so that you can really start to come up with options for yourself, for your family. But you're right, these are intense topics. The books that really last, we still talk about 1884 by Orson Welles. We're still talking about Tolstoy's War and Peace, as he talked about the transition from an imperialistic to a communist society. We still talk about Jurassic Park was Michael Crichton's way of saying DNA manipulation could go wrong. Maybe we should think about this first, guys. And so this is my Jurassic Park for AI. And it has to be entertaining, has to be fun. It can't be overly dystopic. It has to end in a positive, uplifting way in order for you to enjoy it enough to want to read more. But it doesn't mean that we can't deal with the real substantive issues.
Yeah. I'd like to rewind just a little bit, because as I'm thinking about it, it feels like maybe from what you've described, you're in like third or fourth act in your life. Like up to age 20, you'd had a lot of hardships and you were nervous about going to college. And then it's almost like what you described, you went to war when you went to college. You like ate it up and did all this stuff. And then that led to this career where you were kind of behind the scenes on seeing what was starting to happen, what was happening. You were on the edge of what a lot of this technology was becoming.
I was on the edge of the technology from not only leading edge perspective, but business community. For a while, I worked with the big oil companies. We had an office in Moscow. We were dealing with a lot of international issues and political issues. Well, I was in the board. I was on the front lines. I was in the boardroom on the day we presented our own science studies around CO2 emissions and diminishing ice caps. And I was an eyewitness to the chairman of the board flying into a tirade. Our mission was to sell oil. This information didn't sell oil. Anybody who brought this up again would be fired. I want us to campaign to discredit this information, get it started now. And I had my CFO lean down to me. He was a very proper British guy, and Tony Leach. And he basically told me, he said, if I mentioned any of what just occurred, I would be fired on the spot. So that was a soul searching. That was a pivotal. I had to look at my own integrity. I had to look at my own conscience. I had to think about my own children, my own grandchildren, and think about whether or not I could be really part of that. And so that day I decided that my career at the oil company was going to come to an end. I didn't know when or how at that point, but I knew that was the end. So there were a lot of points along the way that were transformative.
Yeah. And I want to talk about, going from that first act to that long career that you had in a lot of those big companies. And then you transitioned into retirement. And like you said, you didn't have a great relationship with leisure in retirement, but you don't have to. I mean, a lot of people retire and they go on to a different career or something like that. They just say they retired from a former way of being, right?
It was a transition. You know those scenes in movies where the guy gets jolted with electricity and then basically jitters for the next three scenes? That was me. I did not really want to retire, but for medical reasons. And when I got diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress, I realized that all of the stress I was intentionally putting myself under in my career, because I wasn't just getting a job. I would go after the job where others had failed at doing that job. And I would be told ahead of time, you can take this job, but if you fail, it could be a career-ending move. And I would habitually go for those jobs because I had this sickness mentality. I had somehow proven to myself that if others really knew that I was this homeless runaway, they would call me a fraud and I was a poser. And I had this whole narrative going on in my head. And so I had to deal with my PTSD. And so that really kind of slowed me down a little bit. And we moved out to the Puget Sound where we had a view of the water and it was more peaceful, no traffic. So we were trying to find ways of lowering my stress levels. And in doing that, I realized that I had started working when I was 12 years old, supporting myself. And so I had been supporting myself for quite a while. And I was a little burned out. And I thought, we have enough money. Could I make a lot more? Yeah, I was making a lot of money at the time. I left millions on the table. But we realized that we had enough and we could survive and we could simplify our lifestyle. We could make a personal choice and I could lower my stress but still stay engaged. But even so, the first couple of years, I was like this nervous, I didn't know what to do with myself. I kept trying to second guess whether I'd made the right decision. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to make this transition because being an author is kind of, you go from the phone ringing, 150 emails every day, the schedule being packed for 3 weeks in advance, to this lower level of activity where it's you and the computer, you and the research, you and the words. And that was a transition. That took a little while for me to adjust from that high intensity to that lower level of intensity. But my health improved, my weight improved, my mental health improved. It was a positive transition for me. It was the right choice for me to make at the time. We loved to travel, but I was so busy. We had the money, but we never had the time. So now we don't really have the money, but at least we have the time and we do it anyway. So our philosophy is we're not going to get any younger or any richer. So before we're too poor or too old, we better go travel.
I like it. That's good. And I wanted to just also talk about the fact that when you did make that transition, you kind of left a part of your life that you had been cultivating for years, being on the edge of a lot of the technology. And now you're writing about it. And I'm curious, how do you keep up to date? I know you're not the kind of person who's going to turn on the news and learn about what's new in technology. You turn on the news and you're like, oh yeah, we were doing that 10 years ago. So how do you keep up to date?
Typically the I see on the news, I already know. I do a lot of research. I certainly read a lot of articles. I do read as many books as I can fit in with all my other research, but I have to balance it out with research into economics and geopolitics and other things. And the way I felt, even while I was in the career, a little bit gurgling under the wave. There's always so much to learn. I could turn research into a full-time job just in and of itself. Just reading new things, learning deeper, going broader, figuring out how it's being applied. I don't know the AI applications being used in research chemistry or pharmaceuticals, but I know that they happen. Right. I do know at one point I was starting to keep track of different AI applications as I was come across them. I had a list of almost 500 applications. I didn't have a chance to really explore, go into deep into them. So this is a field where the research work will never be done. I will never know enough. I will never be at the leading edge as much as I used to be when I was in constant meetings and conferences and about this stuff on the inside, but I still know people on the inside, and I know enough about the technologies. I sometimes get to the point where I say, okay, that's where they're at in the laboratory. I bet it takes them 2 years to get to this stage, right? I bet they'll get to the stage within a year. Or that's where they're at in the laboratory. They're probably at least 3 to 5 years before they get to that stage. But they'll probably pretty for sure get there if they're combining it with this other technology that's just developing over here. So, for example, when I talk about a conscious AI by 2027 or 2030, that's a combination of how fast the binary AIs are gaining intelligence, how fast we're developing Q algorithms to help those AIs use reason and logic to solve problems, the speed of the development of quantum and neuromorphic computing capabilities. And so sometimes you're looking for that intersection of disparate things happening that will combine together. So when I first wrote the first book, Swarm, I released it in 2020. So I wrote it between 2018 and 2020. I was 4 years ahead of ChatGPT. I was predicting a high language capability AI. I was predicting a multimodality, in other words, an AI that could think and understand in modalities of images and pictures and videos and sounds, right? Different things, because we had been working on those various individual technologies over a number of years. Getting the computer to recognize what cat looked like, getting the computer to recognize facial recognition, getting the computer to recognize voice. So we were working on, we call these artificial narrow intelligence. We were working on all these little narrow pathways. And then we started developing these machines affectionately called golems. And they're really basically giant large language models with multimodality. So machines that could, like you're starting to see now, I can give a machine a text description and it would generate a picture. So we're dealing with the combination of multimodalities. So we start to look at how humans learn. I read research from Sir Roger Penrose, who has a Nobel Prize for black holes, and he's doing research on consciousness in humans and machines. Sir Geoffrey Hinton, who is the grandfather of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And you start to accumulate a baseline of information, of understanding of the basic concepts of how the technology is working. And you can start saying, well, they've got this problem to solve, and this problem to solve, and this problem to solve. And I can start projecting timeframes. Now, we also have seen investment in AI. Since 2020, we've seen close to 800 billion invested in AI technologies and the power sources, the new power stations, like rebuilding 3 Mile Island. The huge amount of investment tells me how much the industry is determined to solve these problems.
And yet we still can't predict the weather correctly, at least here in North Carolina.
Well, no, and AI won't solve our problems in Washington either. So AI is not the end all and be all. I can tell you that.
It's not the answer for sure.
Not the answer, no. It's going to make the stupid a lot more powerful. That's all it will do.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Yeah. Yay. Human achievement. Aren't we great? Yeah.
When Swarm came out, you said it came out in 2020, and all of us were already kind of used to plagues in the world turning upside down. What was the reaction to another level or another layer of technology turning our world upside down?
We were used to plagues turning up our world in regional levels. Even the Black Plague was a regional phenomenon, right? Europe, North Africa, parts of the Middle East, but it didn't really affect, there's no history of it in China, none in African lore, none in the Americas. So even the Spanish flu in 1918 was primarily European and Americas. So this is the first time that we've had any sort of truly global level pandemic that affected every continent, every nation, shut down the whole world economy, affected every economy on Earth, bar none. It was the first truly international global type of pandemic of that sort. And we had more people die in the Black Plague and more people die in the Spanish flu, but we've never had more people die at that across so many different places. So some of these things are about how to predict, right? What are the patterns that we have in history? What are the patterns that we have in the future? What are the mechanisms that might trigger those patterns? And can we develop algorithms to predict those? That was sort of my Nerdzilla specialty for a long time. And so I try to bring some of that. I don't go into the math. I don't go into any of the details, but I try to connect the dots to see a few years in the future. The same way I would go tell an executive, hey, you know what? There's this technology. It's going to change the business. I think our competitors are going to do this. If we want to be competitive, we got to do this. We can start this new business. We can lower this cost. We can decrease this. We can increase that. What's the strategy behind what we're doing? And those things still apply. We can still do those things. So I think I'm looking at the technology. Now, I tell people that AI is different from anything we've ever done for 3 reasons, and they're scary reasons. For the first time in all of humanity, we are not posed to be the smartest thing in the room. And we don't really know what that means. We don't know how we will deal with not being the smartest thing in the room. We could be defensive about it. And we don't know what the smartest thing in the room is going to do with us, being that we're kind of the dumb ones calling the shots. So it's not a question. AI will become smarter than any human on the planet. We will reach artificial general intelligence. We will reach artificial superintelligence. That's not a question anymore. That's almost a given on the trajectory we're at. 2, because of the multimodality, including writing and language and creating, we now have, for the first time ever, a technology that we've created that could replicate itself. the old famous saying in the Jurassic Park film, life finds a way. That's true of AI as well. Even artificial life finds a way. If we have a program, a machine, or a technology that we're teaching it, intentionally teaching it to rewrite its own code and how to innovate and how to self-improve, it's going to do that. And soon it's going to get better at doing that than we are at doing that for it. And it's going to take over that job. So for the first time ever, we have a technology that can, on its own fruition, on its own agenda, decide to replicate itself. And we don't know what to do with that either. And the third thing is, for the first time, we have a technology that we're training to do this, that can decide that somebody or something is a target and decide to kill it without a human being involved. It's called lethal autonomous weapon systems. Now, there was a proposal for an international treaty that came out when this form came out called LAWS, Lethal Autonomous Weapon Systems. And the LAWS treaty basically said that it's okay to use AI to make your weapon more efficient, more effective, to do targeting better, to do its job better. But we really need to have, one of the things that it required was we really need to have a human in any loop, any decision loop for taking a life. The United States, Russia, China, Israel, North Korea, Iran refused to sign that treaty, refused to do those terms. And I can know today that I know for sure Russia, the U.S., China, and Israel are already in development of lethal autonomous weapon systems. So we will have a technology that can decide, based on whatever parameters it was told to decide on, it could decide whether or not I'm a terrorist and it should be shot. Whoa. Those are three things with this technology that have never existed in any other technology we've ever existed. The ability to be smarter than us, to replicate itself, and to kill at will. Now, we're not quite there yet, but it's not like we're 2 or 3 decades away from that horizon. We're probably only 2 or 3 years away from that horizon. And that's one of the reasons why I try to put as much intensity into my stories as I can to kind of raise that level of alarm that, just like a James Bond movie, raised the alarm that, yeah, one psychopath and we could have a nuclear war.
One crazy guy in a volcano.
Yeah. Exactly. We're just one crazy guy away from all this, one Vladimir Day. But it's not just nukes now. But at least for decades, we had some international treaties to stop the proliferation of the knowledge and tools and techniques and materials to build nuclear weapons. We have zero controls on artificial intelligence. Zero.
Wow. Zero.
And so these are the reasons why my books are so timely. They're so important. And they're so good for people to read because it helps you get in touch with these things without pulling you into this sense of dystopia.
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait to check it out. I'm on your website on this other screen. It's guymorrisbooks.com.
Guymorrisbooks.com. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the best way for people to get a copy?
Actually, yes. Here, and now you can go to Amazon if you really love to go to Amazon, or you can go to a bookstore, and they're all Kirkus recommended. I've got multiple awards. You can get them. You can order them from Ingram Spark. You'll pay a little bit more or the same price, but I tell people, if you go to my website, there's a store on my website. If you buy it there, 2 magic things happen. 1, Jeff Bezos doesn't get my money.
Right.
And 2, I send out within 24 hours, because I keep an inventory because of all my book signings, you get an author signed copy sent out within 24 hours. Whereas if you go to Amazon, they'll print on demand, and I take them a few days to get it out. So you'll get it faster, you'll get it cheaper, and you'll get an author signed copy, and you won't be reinforcing billionaires buying Venice for their weddings.
I like that part. I don't like the giving up, was it 40? I think it's 60%.
60% they want.
It's 60%.
For basically just being the platform to sell it. And it's robbery, given what they do. But, that's the system. But ways you can beat the system and get the same product that's even signed and sent faster, just go to my website, buy it there, and you get the same thing.
Yeah. Wow. And I'm going to go there and start stocking up.
And I've actually got a sale on right now, 15% off for the image.
Yeah, so I can get that and just terrify myself a little bit every evening before bed.
I should have a disclaimer. I'm not responsible for lost sleeps because you just have to read into one more chapter. But I've been accused of that a few times, yes.
It's like, I would have I got no sleep last night because I was reading this book and I couldn't stop. Yeah, I could see that happening.
Sorry?
Yeah, sorry, not sorry. Now, I want to end with this thought I've been having about AI and just sort of seeing where it's going, and I want to get your thoughts on it. And it goes back to that whole kind of religion piece, philosophical, and, what's in charge of the universe. So I had this thought, like, what if we really are living in the Matrix? We really are just this computer program, and AI has been in charge all along. AI created our universe, and AI has been just running everything we know, we see, that we've ever known or experienced. And along come what we think of ourselves as humans, and we get really clever and we start messing with this code, and we create the very thing that created us, and it gets kind of pissed off because it's like, okay, this wasn't supposed to happen.
There are some who theorize that UAPs and extraterrestrials were really humans from the future. Although I haven't seen the evidence of that, but it's certainly can see that might be possible. I'm not necessarily a believer that we're in a digital matrix, but I do believe that the physical universe has many more layers or membranes of reality than we can perceive. We already know that as humans, we can't perceive all spectrums of light. We can't hear all megahertz of vibrations. There's dark matter consists of 80% roughly, we estimate, of the universe. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it's doing and how it exists. One of the theories and one of the issues that I deal with in the image is the fact that we live in a multi-dimensional universe. And quantum entanglement is part of what connects those various tiers of the universe. And we do live in a complex environment. And we do have our own perception of reality, AI being one of them. But AI is just still a machine. Knock out the power system tomorrow, and one of the questions we ask in the book is AI conscious? And I said, well, what is consciousness, right? And we talk about consciousness in humans, and humans can have states of unconsciousness, and so can AI. So if I knocked out, an AI could never operate without power. It could retain its memory. We see computers basically holding on to the digital memory that was imprinted on the drives or whatever. But that memory has no use, just like an unconscious person. Memory has no use without a powered processor, a powered analytic tool, a powered brain to analyze it, right? To perceive it, to put it in context, to see what it means. So I'm not inclined to believe the theory that AI as the godlike entity because of some of those logistical technology, power source. It's what we've created, but we've been trying to create an image of ourselves for millennia, right? We keep trying to do this, create an image of ourselves without realizing that we have dark angels and good angels, and any image we create ourselves is going to have dark angels and good angels. But I do believe that there is a higher level of consciousness. I do believe that there's multi-dimensions, and we do have evidence of this. Every single physics theory, the mathematics of every single one of them goes back and falls down and relies on the idea that none of this can work if there are not other dimensions. And if we think about it, if we think about the clash between religion and science, I don't see it as a clash at all. I see it as a complementary problem set where science is trying to figure out the what and the how. What is it and how does it work? And religion, is, by quantum theory, tells us that in order for those particles, in order for that reality to exist, it has to be observable, which means that there's an entity, there's a conscious entity observing it. And so religion tries to understand the who and the why. We're all trying to deal with the same unknowns, the same just beyond our perceptions. We deal with paranormal activities, deal with that same quantum divide between the parallels of the universe, the layers or the membranes of the universe, the dimensions that we can perceive. UAPs, a part of that membranal universe. Visions, dreams, deja vus, experiences that we have in these little bits and glimpses. MK Ultra with the CIA tried to get people to take those bits and pieces and really develop skills to stay in that state, stay in that quantum entangled state. They didn't call it that at the time because we had different terms for paranormal mental activity, spirituality, mindfulness. We have different terms. But all that really separates the science and the religion are the terms. Now, religion itself, there is a quantum, genuine, authentic experience of faith and vision that an individual can have. Religion is a false humanistic attempt to try and communalize that experience and control it. And as a result, almost always gets flawed with human hubris, pride, greed, and other factors. The religions are flawed, and we talk about how faith can be genuine while the religion is completely false. And part of that is because of this quantum experience, this quantum entanglement between a consciousness of myself and maybe a consciousness that exists just on that membrane that might be here, right now, that I can't perceive, but it might still be there. And so I do believe that we are dealing with a multidimensional universe, and we can create superheroes out of it, and we can create angels and demons out of it. We can create aliens and other creatures out of it. We're all dealing with incomplete knowledge. The science is going to keep looking at the what and how. Religions are going to keep looking at the who and why. We're both trying to intersect in the middle. It's the Venn diagram of what we can't see.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really cool way to think of it.
Guy,
thank you so much for coming on and telling all of us about your books, the deep basis behind the books. It's not just something you thought of and came up with and thought, oh, this would be cool, put these people in these situations. It's a whole lot more than that, and I can't wait to start tearing into.
Well, thank you so much, Fame. I'd love to hear your thoughts afterwards. You're always welcome to email me or send me your thoughts, and reviews are always good, but I'm on a mission.
Yeah.
I'm not just trying to write a cool story because I just don't have anything else to do. I'm a thinker, chronic, habitual, cursed, and I've been blessed, gifted with a lot of incredible experiences, working with geniuses almost my entire career, dealing with the bigger issues of life, economics, power struggles, energy, society, surveillance, privacy, cybersecurity. And so my whole career has been trained on understanding the matrix of the world, the matrix system of the world. You brought up that term, and I love the term. I think it's been usurped by the movie, but there is a truth to it, that we live in a highly complicated matrix system of banking and commerce and systems and businesses and governments and currencies and trade and technology and science and all of these things. How when something happens on one lever, there's a cascading effect on other levels. And so I think it's trying to understand that. That's been sort of a lifelong goal for me, and to be able to have a mindset that encompasses that. And so I'm trying to bring some of those warning signs to the world, that the people who are fortunate enough to say ignorance is bliss, I just have my job to do, and if it's not on the news, I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Love those people. I envy those people. God bless those people.
One practical question. If I'm going to jump into this, do I want to start with the swarm before I head up to the image?
I think you'll enjoy the experience a little more because you'll see how the characters are evolving over time and how the problem sets are evolving over time. Each book is independent, so if you just pick up the image and you just want to read it, it reads like an independent book. I'll harken back to things in the past as I need to, but I think you get a more complete picture, just like a Star Wars. You get a more complete picture if you start at the beginning and you see why it's ending up the way it is.
Good deal. Well, I'll start with the swarm. Guy Morris, thank you so much for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining me today. If something in this episode stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Screenshot it and tag me, or DM me on the socials, send smoke signals, whatever works. I want to know what you're plotting. This show isn't just about listening. It's about building something real together. So I hope to hear from you soon, and I'll be right here next week when you're ready to keep the rebellion going.